You could probably see I am in Ida's kitchen, and this is at the museum. And so excited that we have with us Christianne Pearce. She is going to begin her program momentarily, but I want to welcome you to the Palm Harbor Museum's August 2022 Meet Me at the Museum. And this is a hybrid program, so we do have a room full, which is lovely, and Christianne is here in the museum. And more of you signed up to be with us online, so I suspect more will be coming in. But I'm glad those of you who are here. If you haven't muted yourself, it looks to me like everyone's muted who needs to be. If you do come unmuted or later, you'll have an opportunity to say something. Otherwise, do please keep yourself muted. But let's stop a moment and welcome Bob Fortner, our president, who will offer a few comments.
Well, welcome everyone again. As Joy just mentioned, I'm the president of the Palm Harbor Historical Society, and glad to see you, see a lot of you again. We have some representatives from the Palm Harbor Women's Club, North Pinellas Women's Club, excuse me. We consider them be one of the same, yes, right. We're Palm Harbor snobs here at the museum. But no, we're delighted to have you here, and thank you, Joy, for hosting our program again. And we know that it's, these hybrid programs have been a challenge. Zoom was a challenge at first. Meetings at the museum alone were a big challenge as well, because you can see our space. When we get more than 30 people in here, it's a little uncomfortable. People are standing around the corner like, hello, what happened? But, so we're just delighted to have this program, and I'm going to get out of the way and get started. If you don't know, the museum's open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 10 to 2. So we welcome you anytime here, and of course you can always peruse our beautiful grounds. I know some of you helped us with our native planting. We do that because we want the campus at least to be open all the time for visitors. So again, thank you. Let's begin.
All right. Thank you so much, Bob. And our guest today is Christianne Pearce. I'm so excited that she's with us here in the museum for our August 2022 Meet Me at the Museum. And she's bringing us a program of notable weather events of Tampa Bay, past, present, and future. And she's going to discuss an overview of the changes in the weather and meteorology and hurricane preparedness in our region. Christianne Pearce is a meteorologist with NOAA Tampa Bay. She is an FSU graduate in meteorology, a former Hillsborough County instructor in earth science, physics, and AP environmental science, and a Bradenton resident who is living her life's passion with the Tampa office of the National Weather Service. And this program, I know, is important to every one of us. I can't think of a single person who isn't interested in what's happening with the weather now. It is having such an enormous impact on every one of us and on our region. So Christianne, thank you so much for joining us here at the museum as well as online. We're looking forward to the program tonight.
Thank you, Joy, very much. And thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for being online. I'm going to start sharing my screen to make sure that it is working. While I do that, I will talk a little bit about myself, and I am Christianne. I also go by CJ because that's, pretty easy for everybody to get. I am from Florida. I have lived in Florida my entire life. I'm actually from Central Florida in Avon Park. A lot of times nobody's ever heard of that because it is probably this small. Actually, I don't know how it compares to Palm Harbor. It might be, I think it's actually smaller than Palm Harbor, but it's in Highlands County. I was born there, raised there, and then I went to school for a little while down in Fort Myers as a communications major, but I always had this passion for weather because in 2004, I'm sure you guys remember, we had 3 hurricanes come right across Florida, back to back to back, pretty quickly. Hurricanes Charlie, Francis, and Jean. And where I'm from, Avon Park, those storms basically crisscrossed almost over my house. So ever since then, I was like, this is some exciting stuff. And that was the year that I graduated high school. But I didn't know if I could do the math and the science for meteorology because it's really math and science heavy. So I was like, well, let me just go down to Fort Myers, get a communications degree, see what I want to do with that, because I like talking to people. But then I'm there and I'm like, I really want to do weather because I love it. So I actually ended up transferring up to FSU, Florida State University, because they have a really good meteorology program. And actually at the time, that school and University of Miami were the only ones that had meteorology in Florida. And I knew I didn't want to leave Florida because, I love Florida. So I got my degree. And then there was this huge, government issue happen. Like they weren't hiring anybody. It was basically a freeze right when I graduated with my bachelor's. So I wanted to work with the National Weather Service. I wasn't really one that wanted to go into like TV because I like talking to people. I don't like talking to cameras, like in front of a green screen. That wasn't for me. So I wanted to work with the government, but there was a big, hiring freeze and, it was just a terrible time. The recession was happening. So then I went into teaching and obviously science because I had that science background. And the first year it was in Hillsborough County, Bradenton High School. The first year I hated it because I never wanted to be a teacher. So then I was like, oh, so I stuck with it though, because it was the only thing I had going at the time. And then I stayed with it for 12 years. So I was a teacher for 12 years at Hillsborough County. I taught all kinds of stuff, earth space science, physical science, physics, environmental science, all kinds of stuff, astronomy, a couple of years. But then I got to a point where, that itch again, that I really wanted to do weather. So I just happened one day after school, I was like, let me just see what the National Weather Service has open because we have offices all over the place. And Tampa's office had an opening along with a bunch of other ones. So I applied at 5 different offices, even though deep down I didn't really want to leave Florida because I love it here. And I was 12 years out of college by then, out of doing meteorology. So I didn't think I had a chance at all. But then they called me and we did the interviews and then we did a second interview. And then the head meteorologist there at the office, he was talking to me on the phone. And even after the second interview, I was still like, I still don't have a chance. And then he offered me the job. So I started actually in January this year at the Tampa office. And yeah, I'm just, like Joy said, I'm living my dream. And it's just been absolutely amazing, especially when I can do outreach like this for the office. So you can kind of see in my picture here and on your screen, hopefully you're seeing that. That is our radar in the background, the taller one. We call that the radar. That's the radome that covers it. So the radar itself is actually in that golf ball looking thing, which is what we called it, the golf ball. The building in front of it is where we launch our balloons. Like we blow them up in that little building. And I'll show you a picture of the balloon in a minute. But that used to have all kinds of equipment up in that little dome that we actually don't even use anymore because, technology has come a long way. All right, so this is the United States, as you guys can tell. And these are where all of the National Weather Service offices are located. So each of the little colored areas is a different office. So Tampa, of course, is the one that says Tampa. That's the one that I work in. We actually are located in Ruskin, Florida. We're not located in Tampa proper because, big buildings that would, impact our radar just a little bit, not a ton. We like to be in a little bit more rural. That when we're launching balloons, you want everybody downtown Tampa like freaking out with all the balloons going up. But you can see here, there are quite a few different areas that have offices. So there's 122 different ones. And we are actually a branch off of the Department of Commerce, and then it's NOAA, and then National Weather Service. So in our office in Tampa, we have about 23 employees, about to be 24 because we just hired another meteorologist. There are at least 2 or 3 meteorologists on the floor working at, all hours of the day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We're always in there watching the radar, doing anything that we can help protect life and property and, get warnings out, stuff like that. So there's always at least 2 people in there. Sometimes there's a lot more than 2, of course, if there's hurricanes or severe weather, but always at least 2. And our office covers 15 different counties. So you can kind of see in the green there, we're down from Lee County all the way up to Levy County. And then we go as far inland as Highlands County, which is the one that I'm from, right up there kind of north of Lake Okeechobee. And then the other little white things that you see out there, that's our marine zone. So we cover the waters as well. So not just over land, but we're also in charge of like doing warnings and whatnot for the port, which, you know, the port brings in a lot of different things at the Tampa port. And then we also have 7 airports that we provide forecasts for. We know that there's other like littler airports around, but like we do 7 of the main big ones, including Tampa International. So we do what's called a terminal forecast for them. So we basically are letting them know when is it going to be the most, you know, rain. The wind shifts are big for airports because, you know, you don't want to be taking off, you know, when the wind's coming at you crosswise, because that's bad for airplanes. We also cover a bunch of different rivers. We keep an eye on them in case, you know, flooding is an issue. Usually this is our rainy season, and usually by now we have rivers that are like close to action stage, meaning they're getting kind of close to starting to almost be flooding. But this year we've actually not reached that yet, which is good, because we don't want rivers flooding, obviously. But yeah, so we have quite a big area. And then the other areas that you don't see in our green are covered by the other offices, Miami, Jacksonville, Melbourne. But yeah, we cover a lot just for our area, including, of course, Pinellas County. So this is just a very quick snapshot of a day in the life of a meteorologist at Tampa Bay. So we do the forecasts that you guys get. We also watch radar 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, of course, even if it's nothing going on out there, we're always watching the radar. We do a lot of outreach kind of things. That middle picture is me at one of the hurricane expos. That one was Highlands County. This is just one of our setups. You can kind of see here how many different computers that we have that we're always looking at. But we all also the ones that put out a lot of the forecasts. And if you ever go to weather.gov, that's our website. You could just do /Tampa Bay, and that would give you our office. But then you can also go to Palm Harbor on the map and click on Palm Harbor, and you would get your forecast for your area. We call it like a little point forecast. You just click on your area, it pops up for Palm Harbor. We also launch weather balloons twice a day. We do it at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. when it is daylight savings time, and then 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. when it's standard time, or the other way around, because I can never remember which one's which. Whatever one right now, we're doing 7 to 7. And that weather balloon goes way, way up there, like 30,000 meters, so 90,000 feet into the air. It collects all kinds of information, especially dew point and temperature, the pressure, what's going on at the upper levels, because that's very important for weather. And then all the offices, well, not all of them, some of them don't, but most of the offices launch this balloon so you can get information from all over the place. Yes, ma'am.
How do you maintain that it stays within the zone you are monitoring?
It doesn't, but because once it gets up way high, it's going to be pushed around by the winds.
Yeah.
But the atmosphere itself is going to be fairly similar no matter where you are. So it's still collecting good data for us. Now, if it gets, like if we launch it and there's like a storm nearby and it gets pulled into that storm, that's not the best representation for what's going on, because that's what's going on in that storm. But that storm is going to be moving away. But it happens. I mean, you know, in Florida in the afternoon, it happens. But we don't launch it if there's lightning around. Like if we can't launch in the lightning, because, you know, Thomas Jefferson, we've all seen that, key in the kite. The other thing we do is we have a Facebook page and a Twitter page that we update all the time. So we, you know, throw stuff out there like that was just about, you know, storm reporting, which is always important. If you ever see hail or, heaven forbid, a tornado or really strong winds, we like to hear about that because it helps us for the future as well, help with our forecasting and stuff like that. So we love to get storm reports from locals to know, especially if we have like a severe warning out and there was hail, that kind of like verifies that, okay, that's a good thing we had that severe warning out. So that's just, you know, some of the stuff. And we do all kinds of stuff. We do TV interviews all the time. We do interviews for newspaper. We work very closely with our local emergency managers for all the different counties that we cover. We work closely with the TV meteorologists as well. We're not all like, ooh, TV meteorologists or ooh, EMs. We work really well together because it's very important because we all have the same goal, keep everybody safe. We issue all the warnings that comes from our office, tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings. Sometimes you'll get the freeze warnings, maybe not in Palm Harbor very often, but hey, sometimes. Excessive heat warning, we get heat advisories way more than we get cold advisories, but red flag warnings, that's for like fire weather. If it's like really dry out, which in Florida in the summer doesn't happen very often because it's always very moist out there. But red flag warnings are if it's really dry, if the ground is really dry, and if it's high winds. That's when we issue those red flags. We don't issue them near the coast very often because usually over here, you're pretty moist in your atmosphere more than you're not. So I'm going to switch into talking a little bit about Pinellas County, since that's where we are. Pinellas County actually holds a little place in my heart because I did my master's thesis in Pinellas County, a bunch of research for it, and especially in evacuations, because you guys are very close to the coast and you have, well, a lot of Pinellas County has water on a lot of sides of it. So I did my master's research on evacuations in Pinellas County. So I'm sure a lot of you guys know a lot of the facts about the county that you live in, but it's, not a huge county, right? It's 38 miles long. You've got 15 miles at its broadest. So there's tons of shoreline, like I mentioned before, which is amazing. And it draws in a lot of tourism, which I'm sure you guys know. It's the second smallest county in the state, but it's like one of the densest counties in the state, which I'm sure you guys know, which is amazing to me that as small as it is, it's the 7th most populated state or county in Florida. So pretty good. And then you can kind of see our breakdown here. This is from the 2020 census, so fairly recent, almost to 1 million. But hey, look at us, females, 52%. Woo, girl power. So here's the breakdown of the different cities. We're up there in Palm Harbor. You've got one more city right above us, and then that's Pinellas County for you. And then, of course, you've got all your different bridges that go from Pinellas over to Tampa. You've got the Skyway that goes down to Manatee. That was another thing that I talked about is, especially for the people that are in that peninsula proper, if there is a major hurricane, there's not a lot of exits except for those bridges. So you have to really plan for those kind of things. So this is just a little breakdown of Pinellas County in general, the climate. So I pulled this from St. Petersburg because we do climate in different areas. And some of the climate sites that we have been around for a really long time. And St. Pete's one of them. So for Pinellas County, you can kind of see here, the far left is the monthly normal temperatures. And this was our new average from 91 to 20. So we do 10-year averages, and then we say that's the new normal, basically, is how that works. So before, it would have been 81 to 91. So January down to December, and you can kind of see there the normal averages don't reach above 90, which I know we all feel like, especially this summer, it's definitely been way more than 90, more than it's not been. But if you look at the overall picture of St. Pete anyway, the normal averages are about 83, 84 for the summer months, of course, and a little bit cooler when you get into the other ones. And then over on the right side over here, these are your records basically for your average temperature and your precipitation. And we started taking this data in 1914. So it's a good amount of data that we've collected for this area. So this is, again, your monthly / annual records. And you can kind of see there next to the month, it has the degree, 73.3 for January. And that was in 1937. So that's how you read that chart. So if you just kind of look at that, that's the average. And then over here, you've got the maximum and minimum precipitation. So in June of 1974, 23 inches of rain, that's a lot. That's why that would obviously be the record. So that's just kind of how that one works out. And then the the rainy season for us is anywhere from like May to October timeframe. Now that, fluctuates, but that's generally when we get the most rain. So if you look at the chart there, the minimum for rainfall, 0 inches in 1953 for May. That was a very dry year for them. And then this one's your average maximum. So not the records, but like the average maximum temperature. Yes, ma'am.
I've got a couple of questions that I've been wondering about this area because I'm originally from Maryland. And this seems to be drier than usual and quieter than usual. And I'm just wondering, on those charts you got for precipitation in the past, has hurricanes been directly correlated to the amount of precipitation? And also with this being so quiet right now, and I want to go back and check history when Tarpon Springs got hit with that big tornado.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that one in a minute.
Christianne, you might repeat that. We heard pieces of it, but you might repeat the questions when you get them if you can.
Oh, no problem. So she's asking, because it's been a little bit drier compared to previous years, if that correlates to the amount of hurricanes we're going to get. Is that what you're asking? Or if precipitation correlates to hurricane activity. So the drier it is, the less likely for hurricanes, because hurricanes obviously have to have moisture. Now, if I go back and look at some of the seasons where it started out drier, that doesn't necessarily mean that it stayed dry. Like right now, we've noticed it's already August 17th, and we've only had 3 named storms, which is pretty low for this time of year. But we've also had a lot of Saharan dust off of Africa, which kind of kills hurricanes. So that's one of the reasons why currently we haven't had a lot. Now that Saharan dust is starting to dissipate and not move across and it comes all the way across the Atlantic, and it's starting to dissipate. So once that happens, we're going to get more moisture in the Atlantic, aloft, right, in the atmosphere, and you don't have that dust layer kind of poo-pooing on the hurricanes, if you will. So we could see a nice ramp up of hurricanes once that Saharan dust is out of there. But I am going to talk a little bit about that though. But yes, that was a good question. Now, some of those records that we saw, I'm sure like for June, that 23 in 1974, that probably was because of tropical systems that moved through, because hurricanes obviously drop a lot of, or even just tropical storms or tropical depressions or anything tropical cyclone related usually drops a good amount of rain. So where you have those records, those are probably years that the area got impacted by some kind of system. Didn't have to be a hurricane, right? This is kind of like what we call the vulnerability risk assessment for Pinellas County. So you can kind of see on the left-hand side, it has Pinellas County versus Florida versus the US. So interesting enough, the freeze risk for Pinellas County is actually pretty high. And that just has to do with the vulnerability of the area, because a lot of us aren't geared for cold weather. So if there is a freeze, then the areas that are more vulnerable to that don't know how to react, so to say. Now, if it was like Maryland, people in Maryland know how to react to cold, and the area itself knows how to react to cold. Our plants, our people, I'm speaking as a native Floridian, don't know how to react to cold very well. And of course, the highest risk for Pinellas County would be severe storms, and then followed by tropical cyclones. So we get a lot of weather that comes off of the Gulf of Mexico. It doesn't have to be a cyclone. We can have just regular thunderstorms coming off of there. That's why it says severe storms as well as tropical cyclones. Because when we start looking at our history, this area hasn't been hit a whole lot with tropical stuff. So this is our last year's $1 billion weather and climate disasters. And of course, if you look at Florida, it was tropical cyclones or hurricanes that caused it. In this case, it was Tropical Storm Elsa and Tropical Storm Fred. So both of those were billions of dollars worth of damage, which any time something like that happens, because there's so much development on the coast, even if it's just a tropical storm, you're going to get flooding issues, you're going to get damage. There's $1 billion right there. So, and then you can kind of see all the other ones. You've got Tornado Alley. You've got thunderstorms, wildfires out west, which we all probably remember the major wildfires they had out there. So those were the billion-dollar disasters. So let's talk a little bit about the past weather events in Pinellas County. I just chose some of the ones that kind of stood out because there's been a lot of history in this area, and I didn't want to put everything down in there. But I picked out some of the ones that I thought were significant. So the first thing I'm going to show you is actually these major rainfall events. So what my climatologist at work, he's not really a climatologist, he's a meteorologist, but he likes climatology. He put together for me a list of the single most rainfall in a day for this area. And this is what that looks like. And I chose Tarpon Springs because that was the closest area that we have climate sites for Palm Harbor. So the maximum rainfall in one day, and then of course it's the storm information. And notice that number 2 isn't even a tropical system. It was actually just a cold front that moved through. Well, not really a cold front, but we do call those cold fronts, even if it is in May and it doesn't really cool us down a little bit. But that's basically what that is. A trough brings that front and just stalled out and sat there and just rained. And that's where the 11 inches for that one day. So we're saying just one day they got 11 inches in Tarpon Springs. That's a lot for Tarpon Springs. And then of course, number 1 is a tropical system, Tropical Storm Debbie. Some of you guys might remember that. That was just in 2012. It dropped a lot of rain. And then the next one was in 1909. You can kind of see here some of these, like number 5, we didn't name hurricanes forever. That's why some of them don't have names. The one in Cape Canaveral is all the way on the other coast. So if you think about it, that one made landfall on the coast and kind of like went up the middle, but it still had so many bands on this side of Florida that there was still tons of rain from it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you and Palm Harbor have to get directly impacted, or, you know, the storm doesn't have to make landfall here for you guys to be impacted by it, because they're pretty large, which I'm sure you've all seen them.
2012 was my first year here.
Oh, so welcome to Florida in 2012.
I freaked out. Being from Maryland, I was like, oh my God, what have I done?
Our friend from Maryland said 2012 was the first year here. So she was greeted with Tropical Storm Debbie. So this image is all of the historic tropical cyclones. So remember, tropical cyclones are anything from depression all the way up to category 5. It just means that it's tropical in nature. And you can kind of see all the different zigzags and wigwags, and most of them say unnamed because a lot of them didn't have names. We didn't start doing that until like the 50s. So this is since 1840. And then if I do this, I got rid of everything that wasn't a hurricane. So notice the decrease in the amount of lines crossing the area. And if Pinellas County is the one that is highlighted. So I've got a couple here. This guy right here, the red one, so that's category 3. And I've got this one, which is category 1. Those were the last major hurricane and the last regular hurricane to impact close by. So 1946 was the last hurricane that was within 50 miles. And 1921 was the last major hurricane. Major means 30 or 3, 4, or 5 in this area. Yes, in this area. So that's a long time that we haven't had a hurricane or a major hurricane directly impact our area. Yes, ma'am.
In 2017, when I came from Maryland down here to buy.
Oh, you were greeted by Irma. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, I got a visit of 2 hotels. I almost slept on there. So what was that?
So she's asking about Hurricane Irma because in 2017, she moved from Maryland. So Hurricane Irma, so I'm going to have to walk away from the screen for a second, is this line right here. Yeah. And you'll notice it actually wasn't within whatever my search criteria, I think it was 50 miles for this one. Yeah. It went more in the middle of Florida and not up the coast. Now, yes, you guys got rain and some wind off of Irma for sure, but it wasn't a direct impact. And really, if you look at a hurricane, you know, it's a big old circle basically. The right top is the strongest winds. So that would have been over on this side, like Orlando area. So you and I too, because I'm from Bradenton, we were spared when in the scheme of things, which my thesis, my research for my master's, that was basically Hurricane Irma was my research. And, you know, a lot of people evacuated out of the area because it was a category 5 at one point, and everybody wanted to get out of town. And then it didn't really impact like, you know, it was expected to. So then people were kind of stuck, and it was just, Irma was a very big learning experience for everybody involved. Meteorologists, emergency managers, the governor, everybody learned from that storm. And hopefully we don't get one like that again, but knock on wood, if we do, we're going to be more prepared for it this time.
What did you learn? I don't understand.
I think the call for evacuations were a little early because remember at one point Irma looked like it was going to go up the East Coast. So all of Miami evacuated, and then it shifted its track again. And then it was going to be the West Coast, our coast. So then all of the West Coast evacuated. So then you have West Coast of Florida with the 7th most populated county, PINELLAS, and all of Miami-Dade and all those counties, everybody was evacuating. It was the biggest evacuation event in Florida. And it was just, we didn't have enough gas. We didn't have enough resources. And Orlando got hit. Yeah. Yeah.
So how would you change things?
So it was a communication thing, I think. Like everybody was more reactive to what was going on. And there wasn't a lot of planning amongst the counties. I mean, the counties that are close to each other, there was a lot of planning, but we should have been planning with the state of Florida, which we do some of that when there's hurricanes. All of Florida gets together, but there needed to be a little bit more communication. And that was the biggest thing. Communication with us, with the emergency managers, with the governor's office, with the gas, you know, just a lot of other things need to be able to plan out.
What is the communication between you and the Department of Meteorology in the radio, so in the TV stations?
She's asking what is our communication with like the TV mitts. We talk with them a lot. They take what we say and they, you know, they run with that. You know, they do their own stories and stuff like that. They do talk with us though. Like we have a person at the station, at our station, always on the phone during hurricane season, during a hurricane.
Christianne, we have a question online as well. Someone who would love to ask you a question. Martha, did you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Thank you. Christianne, I assume that you know about the iron ore and the Indian Princess. Under the reason why we've not had a hurricane hit Pinellas County since 1921, 101 years ago. One story is the iron ore under Pinellas County, which to my knowledge, we have no iron ore. And the other one is an Indian Princess. You've heard those.
I have heard, yes.
Would you like to elucidate
And they're not in your scientific data? Huh?
We don't usually look at the, you know, Indian burial grounds as like a scientific method for deterring hurricanes, but I have heard that that is one of the reasons why Pinellas County has not been struck because of the, yes, we've been blessed. So this, that hopefully you guys see on your screen, this is the 1921 hurricane breakdown. So you can kind of see here, it started down there in the Caribbean and then as a low pressure system, which is how they all start. And then it slowly drifted north and then east. So it was at a time a category 4 hurricane before making landfall. Luckily, it downgraded just a little bit because right off the coast of Florida, it's really shallow. And it's almost like being over land when it gets that close to the coast. So it kind of weakens the storm just a little bit. I mean, the water's still very, very warm, but it's not as much energy getting up into the storm. So, I mean, a category 3 storm is still major. And the crazy thing about this storm is, you know, in 1921, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the internet. They didn't have the resources to get the word out. It was like the day of. They were like, oh, by the way, there's a storm coming. So people were, you know, preparing then. So here is the St. Pete Yacht Club, and that is water that you are seeing. That is water. This is one of the docks or the piers. You can kind of see here how it got destroyed. There's a boat. Here's the St. Pete Pier at the time. So obviously in 1921, it wasn't as populated as it was now, which is thank goodness, but it still caused a lot of damage. It even caused a lot of damage inland, like all the orange groves that like the grove industry had a big hit from this particular storm, because that was booming in 1921 already, because, you know, it's Florida, right? So, I mean, that storm had a lot of impacts, even as far inland. It had a lot of impacts in the Pinellas County area. There was flooding all over the place. And there's like a lot of people that, you know, you can pull up old newspapers from the 1920s. And at that time, we weren't called the National Weather Service. We were called the Weather Bureau. And I think we were more in Tampa at that time instead of in Ruskin. But people were knocking on the doors to like tell them, hey, we've got some flooding up the road here. And, you know, and looking for like safe harbor, because they're like, oh, you know, the Weather Bureau knows what's going on. They were looking to get reports of what was going on, because, you know, we didn't have a way besides printed, you know, press to get that word out. So it was a very interesting storm. And we just had the 100-year anniversary for it last year. And on our webpage, the weather.gov Tampa, we have like a nice spread about it and a video that the office did before I was there, because I wasn't there last year. But I mean, it was a very interesting storm. And again, the last major hurricane to impact this area.
Sorry, can we go back to Irma?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I think that the area needs to have better evacuation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean shelters.
Yeah, that was another thing that we talked a lot. She said the shelters for after Irma need to be better.
I was calling up, you know, shelters all over Fogle, and luckily, because my mother and father are walking with canes and disabled, we were let in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's the only reason why we were let in.
That was another thing that we talked about in our meetings, because we meet every year with a lot of the emergency managers, and the shelters was one of the things that we need to improve on this and have more shelters. We need to have more shelters with options, especially with like pets, because people don't want to leave their pets. Yep. Yeah, she was just mentioning about the shelters for Hurricane Irma and how they weren't that great. So, and I said that was one of the things that we did talk about in our meetings to help improve upon that, which again, hopefully we don't ever have to do that again. But yes, for future, shelters would definitely be a good thing. So she's asking about Hurricane Irma and what happened. And if you were in this area, I'm assuming at that time, it basically sideswept you. Like here's Pinellas County. Irma went up the state of Florida. So you guys didn't have a lot of impacts from it. It kind of like spared this area. You had maybe some rain and maybe a little bit of wind, like a normal afternoon thunderstorm, but the impacts weren't felt here. They were felt inside. Oh, she's asking about the empty coastline. So when the hurricane was out in the Gulf, a lot of the water was pushed towards the storm. So it left the coast right there. Yeah, it was an interesting storm. All right, so this is a news clipping from the 1921 hurricane. So you can kind of see here some of the different things. Aged man clinging to tree, sees wife lost. I mean, just crazy stories from the storm. Here's another newspaper. You can kind of read some of these things, like the city's recovering from the grip of a tropical hurricane. And it said $2 million with known loss of 2 lives. So $2 million in 1921, that's a big deal. And then this is just another one. It kind of shows you, and Hillsborough too. Ybor City, you know, there's a big old ship on shore there and a house that was in the water. So it's interesting to look back on some of the older articles from when it happened, because there's a lot of nice information there. All right, so switching gears completely for the next event. In 1977, it snowed. I'm sure some of you guys remember that. So yeah, it snowed, and that was the last measurable snow for South Florida. Southwest Florida. Well, probably most of South Florida. So the last measurable. Now, there might have been events where there were like flurries that didn't stick to the ground. It just melted. That could have happened. But like the last able to see it on the ground snow was 1977. Yep. And that was before my time. And there you can kind of see the breakdown of the amounts that people got. St. Leo University over there, they got 1 inch of snow. That's a decent amount for Florida. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to throw in here because, you know, last measurable snow in Florida obviously doesn't happen ever. And then here's one of the newspaper articles from that particular event. And you can kind of see there it brought on glee and problems. So imagine if we had 1 inch of snow nowadays, the amount of headaches it would cause. Woo, the traffic on 75, no way. So just interesting. And then another, you know, impact in the past was this tornado outbreak that happened in 1992. So this was in October, and you can kind of see the time range there from 8:40 in the morning to 9:30 in the morning is when the tornadoes themselves were happening. There was obviously more storms happening, but the tornadoes were usually during that time. And the highest intensity was an F3. So, you know, tornadoes, kind of like hurricanes, go from a 0 to a 5. So an F3 for Florida is actually pretty impressive. We don't get F3s in Florida very often. Our dynamics in the atmosphere don't support big old tornadoes like they get out west, right? So an F3, you can kind of see the pictures that I have here. It looks like a bomb went off. And that's what that guy in this post said. It looks like a bomb blast, buildings down, roofs gone, windows out of cars. It was just something like they had never seen before. And there were a couple of different tornadoes that passed through, but the highest one was the F3. And you can kind of see the path length for that, bless you, for that one was 3 miles. So 3 miles of that storm doesn't sound like a lot, but 3 miles, that's a lot. That's a lot of neighborhoods that could be impacted. And for that one, amazingly, there were only 4 deaths, which I mean, 4 is still too many. There were quite a few injuries. They don't even know the number of houses that were damaged because so many were damaged that they just, you know, in 1992, they probably stopped counting. But it was just incredible, the amount of destruction. And you can kind of just see from the pictures what it was like.
What is the lifespan of a tornado from the time it starts till the time it dies?
She's asking what the lifespan of a tornado is. So it can last, like for Florida, because we don't have very intense tornadoes very often, they're usually, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes and they're done. Now out west where you get the big ones, those ones can last hours. Yeah, and move. They're not staying in one place for an hour, but they're moving. Yeah. But Florida, our tornadoes, 15, 20 minutes tops. And then if they're a big one like that F3, that one probably lasted a bit longer. Yes, ma'am.
After Irma, I was riding my bike around the whole countryside area, which is just adjacent to Palm Harbor. And it seemed like the areas where we have these big power lines and there's open spaces underneath them, that where you saw the most damage were the houses that backed up to those open spaces. Is that my imagination, or did that maybe let little tornadoes pop up? Because so many more trees down, junk blown around.
She's saying after Irma, when she was riding her bike around, the areas that like backed up to big open spaces seemed to have more damage and debris than areas that were highly populated. And that's actually because wind filters through there easier. And if you're like, houses block some of that wind. So if you're in like in the middle of a neighborhood, those other houses around you are blocking that wind. If you're on the outside of the neighborhood with that open space behind you, that wind has no blockage. So it's just ripping through that area. So that's probably why it didn't have, I mean, hurricanes are known to spawn up little tornadoes. That is true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there were a bunch of tornadoes there. All right, so that's the tornado outbreak. And then in 1993, the next year, there was this, we called it the storm of the century. And basically it was up in the north, it was a nor'easter. And if you're from the north, you guys know what nor'easters are. They're big winter storms. In the south, they're not winter storms because it's Florida, but they are big storms. And it's basically a big cold front that moved through. And you can kind of see from the radar image there, that's what they look like when they're coming across Florida. And they can have wind gusts 90 miles per hour and greater. So kind of like a hurricane, but it's the winter time. So this particular storm was just amazing. It had storm surge with it, which again is usually with just tropical cyclones, but this one had storm surge because it had so much water behind it that it pushed in. It had 16 inches of rain in just 24 hours for areas. There were 11 tornadoes that spawned from it. It was just crazy. And that's why it's still referred to as the storm of the century for Florida, because it was just very impactful. And on the picture on the right there, you can kind of see where all the tornadoes were and where the wind damage that was reported was located. So just an amazing time. I mean, I was around in 93. I would have been 6. I don't remember that particular, I lived on, the same place, but I don't remember that. But I mean, I'm sure my parents, when I asked them about it, they remember it. So this is another line of tornadoes that can move through. So to answer whoever asked that question, if the 92 one was the last one, and 2020, there was another set of tornadoes that moved through. This time EF2 was the greatest rating, which again, EF2 for Florida, that's pretty decent. There's just some of the damage that you can kind of see. It went into the water and then got near whichever bridge that, I think that's the Howard Franklin Bridge. So it started over land, went into the water, but even over the water, we don't switch it to be called a water spout. It's still a tornado because it's still very large and impactful. Luckily, it dissipated before reaching Tampa and the international airport and the, big hospital that's over there and all that stuff. But I thought that was kind of interesting because that was like, it was a decent tornado for Florida. Now, even today in 2022, August 17th, we had a couple of water spouts off the coast. Just Bradenton Beach today had a good one. So, I mean, we do get them. And especially in the summertime, we get water spouts and those can move on to land. A lot of times they don't. And even when they do move on to land, they're not that exciting. They dissipate very quickly. Like the video from today's water spout, the guy is literally standing 100 feet away from it, just watching it come onto shore, videotaping it the whole time. Everybody's just like, woo, and then it dissipates. So, I mean, it wasn't really doing anything crazy. So this is another one from 2020, but in February. The other one was in December, or January or something. Here, you can kind of see this was just an EF0, but look at all the damage just that EF0 caused. So, I mean, it didn't even have to be a very, very, very strong tornado to still have impacts. So this one was in St. Pete. You can kind of see the line right there, like right through the middle of Pinellas County. And again, not a very long time that it was there, but it was 9 miles. So it was a long path, but it didn't last very long. So that's one of the good things. If I had to say a good thing about a tornado in Florida is that they don't last very long and they're usually not very strong. So currently, this is the newest August 4th update from the National Weather Service from NOAA. And if you saw the original one that came out in the early June time, their outlook, it was very similar to what they have right now, still predicting above average with, 60% above normal. So not 100% above normal that they think. They think it could be 60%. So they're still thinking we could have 14 to 20 named storms, 6 to 10 of those being hurricanes, 3 to 5 of those being major hurricanes. So remember, to have a name, it just has to be a tropical storm. It doesn't have to be a hurricane. So we name them. Like with Alex, everybody remembers Alex that happened in whatever month that was. It was potential tropical cyclone 1 when it went through Florida. And then when it passed over Florida, when it got into the Atlantic, it finally became Alex and then didn't do a whole lot. So this is 2021. Last year. This is the hurricanes from last year. Ida, the one that's highlighted there in red, was the one that caused the most amount of damage money-wise, because it was a major hurricane. We also had, trying to see it, Larry, but notice Florida, we didn't have too much near us. Elsa is the one that's closest to Florida on the coast there. That was Elsa. And then Fred was the other one that kind of went out into the Gulf and then up in North Panhandle part. And then this is right now. We've gone Alex, Bonnie, and Colin. That's all we've got so far. And like I mentioned before, that Saharan dust has actually kind of helped out things a little bit, keep things a little bit calm. But this is where we are. So notice this is the number of storms per 100 years. We are right there in the middle of August. We haven't reached the peak for hurricane season yet. So don't, start putting away your kits and all that just yet, because there's still time. And it lasts until November 30th, but we have had storms outside of that. And the one thing, if I can't stress enough, it only takes one storm to change your community, to change your life. So always, always be prepared. And there's different things you can do. Always determine your risk. So for Pinellas County, storm surge is a big one. And I'm going to touch on that one first. And it's actually considered the deadliest threat for a tropical cyclone. Not the wind, which is also very bad, but the storm surge is really, really deadly. So the high winds will push the seawater towards the coast. Even weak tropical storms can have storm surge with them. And you can kind of see here some of the pictures of what storm surge can do for coastal areas. The picture in the middle there that's water all the way up to those interstates. This is some of the coastal areas that have been washed out. Houses can be moved. I mean, we've seen that's a picture from Galveston where most of the houses are gone from the storm surge because they get picked up and moved. Here's another one where you can kind of see that's a bridge, which obviously there was a road that goes in there. All that water is covering the road. So storm surge is so deadly because it's fast moving water and people sometimes don't realize how deep it is and they'll try and get out in it. They'll try and drive their car. They'll try and go and it sweeps people away. And like with Hurricane Katrina, a lot of people went up onto their roofs, but that didn't really help them too much because then they got stuck up there for a lot of time. And sometimes if people get stuck in their attics and the water goes up to the attic, they can't get out then. So, I mean, it's just storm surge is deadly. So this is a map of the worst case scenario storm surge for Pinellas County. This is not something that's ever happened. This is something that was computer generated. If a hurricane was to hit like a Category 5 in the northern part of Pinellas County, all the water from the storm would get pushed into Tampa Bay. And you can kind of see, well, you might not be able to see because it's tiny, but the storm surge, you got 21 feet worth of storm surge in there. 21 feet is a lot of water. So if there ever was, and hopefully there never will be, the worst case scenario hurricane, a Category 5, this is what Pinellas County would encounter most likely. And that would be most likely at high tide, but even at low tide, you're still going to have really, really high storm surge. And obviously the higher parts of Pinellas, which we all know is that little blob right there, like where the baseball stadium is, it's on like a little higher area. But even look at Tampa, I mean, McDill, underwater.
The gray part is
That's land, dry land. Yeah, the gray part is the dry land. The red is the deepest part. The red part is the deepest. So that's 24.6 up there in North Pinellas / Hillsborough. It is crazy. So just to, we've been very lucky in Florida, but worst case scenario, it might, maybe, hopefully never, but could happen. So the other thing you need to do is think about evacuation, which we've kind of talked a little bit about anyway, but, having an idea, not waiting for the very, very last minute. With Hurricane Irma, I boarded up my windows the day before it hit because I was like, well, I'm in a neighborhood. I've got all these people to block the wind from my house. I'll be fine. But I am pretty close to the coast. So I was like, well, and then it was a Category 5. And I was like, yeah, okay, it's time to board up the windows. And of course, in Bradenton, kind of like in this area, it bypassed me. I mean, I did get some wind, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Always better to be safe. So if you don't know what your evacuation zone is, PinellasCounty.org has a nice feature where you can type in your exact address and it'll tell you. So I did that for Palm Harbor Museum. So on the left-hand side, I typed in the address for this building And you can kind of see here, the evacuation zones are colored. So if you're in an evacuation zone A, that's the red. And that means you're the first ones to get evacuated, which of course are the ones right along the coast. Anything like that's not colored, like Palm Harbor Museum, you're not in an evacuation zone. That doesn't mean that you don't have to evacuate. I mean, it just means that you would be given the choice. You would never be mandatory evacuated if, unless worse things happen. So you can kind of see Pinellas County here on the right-hand side, where I just showed you that map with the storm surge, that correlates to those evacuation zones, right? So anything near the coast, you're probably going to get evacuated. Anybody on those barrier islands, you're going to get evacuated. Any low-lying areas, those are going to get evacuated. But again, you can go to pinellascounty.org and type in your personal home address and see where you fall. The other thing that's important is to assemble your disaster supplies. Again, don't wait till the last minute, because people get a little crazy and all the bread and water will be gone, because everybody apparently makes a bunch of sandwiches and drinks a whole lot of water right before hurricanes happen. We recommend 7 days worth. I know like the national average is usually just have 3 or 4 days worth, but after living through the 2004 hurricane season, I was out of power for 2 weeks at my house. Having 7 days worth of non-perishables and stuff like that is good. Having batteries, cash is always a good thing, because a lot of times if your power is out, a lot of the other areas' power is out, and cash is the only way to handle stuff. So these are just some of the things that you can think about. Have multiple ways to get information. So again, Pinellas County has what's called Ready Pinellas. It's an app that you can get on your phone, and it sends all these alerts. It gets alerts from the National Weather Service. Any like if there's a tornado warning in your area, it'll alert your phone. And it usually only alerts if your area is going to be impacted. It's not going to alert you if like Hillsborough County or St. Pete even. It'll just alert your area. NOAA weather radio is a good thing to have on hand. That usually picks up a pretty good signal. We have our social media that you could always follow. Of course, if we don't have internet or power, then not as easy. But the weather radio, we update that a lot. Make sure you have your insurance all checked out, always good in Florida. Keep your documents with you, keep them safe. Strengthen up your home, cover your windows if it's looking like it's going to be exciting. The number 2 one right there, secure loose outdoor items. Oof. We had stuff even with Irma, even though it wasn't that bad in Bradenton, people had stuff flying all over the place in my backyard. I went out there and there's like somebody's, chairs. I got a whole new dining room set back there. I was just, trampoline. So secure the loose items, even if it's not looking like it's going to be that bad. Trimming your trees is a good thing to do, because after Hurricane Charlie in 2004 and Bartow in particular, I remember all the oak trees that hadn't been touched in, hundreds of years. A lot of those limbs were down on the ground because they just hadn't even been looked at. Obviously, help your neighbors, help your friends, check in, especially afterwards. This is all just stuff that you could have going on, a written plan. And of course, don't panic. That's, the least thing you need to do. And I'm just going to go quickly through what's going on for the rest of the season. So August, September, October, that's our temperature outlook. We're not like really, really likely to be above average, but we're still in that chance of leaning towards above average for temperatures, which, we're kind of used to that by now. But look, seasonal precipitation, we're going to get rain. So it's going to be hot and it's going to be rainy for August, September, and October. And then we have what's called La Nina and El Nino. That drives a lot of our climate. So right now we're in La Nina, and that you can see this trend here. Those are the months. So right now we're in August, September, October, that second one in there. We're definitely in La Nina. It's expected to be La Nina for a long time. And then January, February, March of next year, we're going to be kind of neutral. What does that mean? It means for winter time, warmer and drier for the southeast. Notice the southwest. The northeast up there, wet and cold, but for us, warm and dry. So then the other thing I just wanted to mention is in our office, because we live in Florida, we have made this climatology setup where depending on where that high is, the Bermuda high, we can kind of use that to predict what our weather is going to be like during the day for that particular day during the summertime months. So for example, if we were, let's say, in what's called Regime 6, and we have 8 of them, that means the high is off the east coast and the wind is blowing from the southeast towards the northwest. That means this is what your precipitation is going to be like. The coastal areas are going to get it in the morning more likely, and then the evening time, you can kind of see it starts to dissipate. So southwest Florida will most likely get more rain than northeast Florida, all based on these regimes that we've made. So we're kind of using the past to help us predict the future. And we use these regimes every day. And you can actually go to our website, which is weather.gov/Tampa or TBW. And then if you go all the way down, you can see this little thing that says text product. You hit the area forecast discussion, and it pops up with what we talked about for the day. And if you like to read those, you like to read those. But if you want to know, hey, I'm really into this regime thing to figure out how much rain I'm going to get at my house, we list which regime we're in for that day. And again, this is just during the summer months, during our rainy season that we do this. So like the other day, we were in regime 4. And that just means that in the mornings, we're going to get rain on the coast. Like this morning, rain on the coast. And then it moves inland. When we're on a different flow, sometimes if the wind's coming from the southeast, it's going to rain in the middle part of the state and then move to the coast in the evening. And it's all based on these regimes that we've looked at. There we go. I made it. Any questions?
So my question is, what do I advise, for example, to hear? What station is better? Or how do we hear from you if there's no communication?
She's asking what's the best way to get her weather information. So a lot of the TV meteorologists use our area forecast discussion to kind of base what they're going to be looking at. And then they look at models, they look at what's going on as well. They know what's going on. So TV meteorologists are, they're great. Whatever you watch, that's fine. But like I said, our weather.gov, that's always a good place to go. We have the forecast, the 7-day forecast on there. Any site usually stems from what we put out.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. You have been wonderful.
Thank you. I got another question out here. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a way to figure out if I am thinking of going to the beach?
Mm-hmm.
Where do I look whether the water is
The tides.
nice and flat or wavy?
Oh, waiting. She's asking where should she look to figure out if it's going to be a nice day at the beach or too wavy at the beach. Really, that has to do with the winds, and any forecast app or our website will tell you the winds of the day. So, like for example, if it's under 5 miles per hour, it's going to be pretty calm. If it's winds out of the east, it's going to be pretty calm. If it's winds out of the west, that's blowing from the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to be a little bit more rough. But it really just has to do with how much wind is blowing in that particular area. Yep. I got one more out here. Sorry.
Believe that there's anything that is protecting Pinellas County from getting hurricanes?
She asked if I believe if there's anything protecting Pinellas County from hurricanes. Florida, like I mentioned before, the Gulf of Mexico is pretty shallow right off our coast. And a lot of times the steering, which is the things that are steering the storms, it just never pans out that they turn towards where we are very often. And that has to do with mainly like where is the jet stream, where is the high out in the Atlantic, and that's really what steers it. And then usually when they get into the Gulf, they like to go to Louisiana, like we've seen. They like to go over to Texas, and that's just like what's steering them that way. Now, is there something protecting Pinellas County? You guys be the deciding factor of that. Let me take a couple from the online people.
Yes, we do have, first of all, I want to say an outstanding program. We've had some wonderful comments here. Martha, you had a question?
We didn't hear anything really about lightning and other than kind of an extension of thunderstorms. But the one other thing I've always been fascinated with, and it's actually post-storm, has to do with the Waffle House Index. And that has become actually formalized in the recovery area. And you might want to mention what the Waffle House Index is. I assume you are familiar with it?
I have never heard of the Waffle House Index.
Oh, really? it's actually used in recovery. If you can't get, it's the first, if they are not open, then everything is closed. And even after Irma, it was the only place you get a hot coffee, but you had to have cash for it because the computers didn't work. But I do think that we've learned. I mean, I was down for the first week. I had a whole team of nurses from PINELLAS down to Andrew in that first week, and there weren't even any shelters down there. We were actually able to get a hotel. But when we were down there, before I got back, and that was the first week, 2 houses in my neighborhood had their roofs removed by that tornado in '92. So it's kind of like it can happen anywhere. But as a native Floridian, I just had a 50-foot oak tree explode in my front yard, 10 feet from my house. And of course, it moved, but because it was just destroyed. But to me, it could have been me. And we have these that are out there, either on the beach is the tallest thing around, or under trees, like next to the White House, the tallest thing that was around. And they don't know enough to avoid those kind of injuries. And you can, but they just don't know.
Yeah, lightning is always a struggle because so many people see it and they hear it and they still go about what they are doing, including playing at the beach, playing golf. And we put so much out, especially on social media, about, when thunder roars, go indoors. If you can hear it, definitely go inside. If you can see it, then definitely go inside. But unfortunately, I mean, we can preach it all day long. If people don't follow the rules, then, I mean, there's only so much we can do.
Now, are you protected under a tree as long as you don't touch?
No. She asked if she was protected under a tree. No.
Even if you don't touch.
No. See, lightning, what happens is you have the main bolt, which that's usually what's going to hit the tree, but you also have these side bolts. And even if you're under the tree, those side bolts are going to impact you. And even if you're standing far away from the tree, there's what's called the ground current, and that can get you. So trees are not a good area. Find the shelter that you can get to. If you can't find a shelter anywhere, the best thing to do is get in like a low-lying ditch area if you can, and just lay down. But try and get inside.
Is that the case with a tornado as well?
Yeah, tornado as well. If you're in a kayak, I would.
Plastic kayak. Are you protected?
No, because you're still on the water. The water is a current, like it's a conductor. It'll move that electricity. So you want to get out of the water. Yeah, don't be in a kayak. Don't be under a tree.
Okay, so just you're not just out in the open in a kayak?
I would get to shore as quickly as you could.
Well, yeah, I know that, but if you're on the river, there's no, you can't.
But
Maybe don't go out when it's thunderstorming.
right. When it starts getting dark, you get out.
Yeah, when it starts getting dark, get out of the water.
You are better off inside the car, but not completely, because it could happen.
She asked if you're better off inside a car for lightning. Yes, because what happens is it's not because of the tires, actually. It's because the car itself is metal and it's going to conduct through the car, like around it and to the ground. Yeah. But don't touch your windows.
Category 5 hurricane, doesn't really matter if you're a little bit above as far as the wind. From what I saw in Michael, it just blew everything.
She said if it's a category 5 hurricane, we're all gonna die anyway. She didn't say that. She said we would all be impacted. Yes, to answer that question, yes. Yeah, category 5 is something none of us have ever seen or lived through, because we haven't had one. I mean, Hurricane Andrew in when was that? Early 90s. It was a 4. Yeah, that would be the closest thing. Yeah, Hurricane Andrew, category 4. Overhand. Yeah, that was definitely, and we all remember the pictures from Hurricane Andrew was just destruction. Yeah, 91 or 92. I think it was early 90s. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So because of global warming and everything, how and the way our weather, we can see right now that our weather is definitely changing. Like, what is life going to be like 10 years from now?
She's asking me about what the weather is going to be like 10 years from now. And the best thing I can tell you is I'm not a climatologist. I only really care about current, like 7 days. Now we do look a couple months into the, with the models and everything like that. Now, do we have a little bit of change happening? Of course. Can I tell you what it's going to be like in 10 years? No. I can tell you what it's going to be like in a few months.
Yeah.
Hot and dry. Well, for the next couple months, it's going to be hot and wet. And then in the wintertime, it's going to be hot and dry. Anything else from my online friends?
I think we're done here. Christianne, you received some wonderful comments.
Oh, thank you guys.
Share them with you. Diane said, kudos, most informative and professional. Sandy said, thank you. Great information. If people want to get in touch with you, if they have questions for you or for NOAA, where should they email or call?
Want me to put it in the chat?
Yes, that'd be great. Christianne.Pearce@NOAA.gov. So thank you so much. You've just given us a wonderful program.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.